Commander Hyunwoo stared at the star map floating above his command table. The bright red zone marked Sol 3 Quarantine, Entry Forbidden, had always bothered him. In his 15 years serving the galactic hegemony, he had never seen a restriction so absolute. No ship could go within 50 light years of that small yellow star. No exceptions, no explanations. The hegemony ruled 847 star systems with complete control. They had the strongest military in the galaxy. They had technology that other species could only dream about. Yet this one tiny system remained off limits, protected by laws that were older than most planets in the Empire. "Sir, we're getting strange readings from Sector 7, reported Lieutenant Tae-young from his sensor station. His voice carried a note of confusion that made Hyunwoo turn around. "What kind of readings?" "Unknown ships, sir. 3 of them. They're operating near the quarantine border but not crossing it." Tae-young's fingers danced over his controls. "They're different, sir. I've never seen energy signatures like these." Hyunwoo walked over to the sensor station. The display showed 3 blips moving in precise formation near the Forbidden Zone. Their ships were sleek and smooth, unlike the angular designs the hegemony preferred. Even stranger, they seemed to be made from materials that the sensors couldn't properly identify. "Smugglers?" asked Hyunwoo. "I don't think so, sir. These ships are too advanced. Their technology reads as... well, it reads as better than ours." That was impossible. The hegemony had the best technology in the galaxy. They had conquered every species they met because of their superior weapons and ships. No one could build anything better than what the Empire produced. "Open a communication channel," ordered Hyunwoo. "Channel open, sir. Unknown vessels. This is Commander Hyunwoo of the Hegemony Defense Force. You are operating in restricted space. Identify yourselves immediately." The response was silence. The 3 ships continued their smooth flight pattern, completely ignoring the hegemony patrol. "Try again," said Hyunwoo. "Unknown vessels. Respond immediately or face military action." Still, nothing. Then, without any warning, the 3 ships simply vanished. Not destroyed, not jumping to hyperspace. They just disappeared as if they had never been there. The only trace left behind was a faint energy reading that matched no known propulsion system in hegemony records. Hyunwoo felt a chill run down his spine. In all his years of service, nothing had ever just vanished like that. Even the most advanced stealth technology left some trace that their sensors could detect. Back at Hegemony Central Command, the report caused immediate concern. Counselor Dae-jin, the Empire's chief military leader, read the incident file with growing anger. He was a large man with gray hair and scars from his early military service. He had built his career on the idea that hegemony's strength was absolute. "It is probably just sensor malfunction," he declared to the gathered officers. "No one has technology better than ours. It's impossible." But intelligence analyst Yoon-ji wasn't convinced. She was young for her position, only 32. But she had earned her rank through careful attention to details that others missed. Something about this incident felt important. "Sir, I'd like permission to review the classified files about the Sol 3 quarantine," she said. Dae-jin waved his hand dismissively. "Those files are restricted for good reason. The Sol 3 system contains primitive hostiles who attacked our forces 200 years ago. We contained them and they've stayed contained ever since. But sir, if they were primitive 200 years ago, what are they now? Still primitive. Primitives don't become advanced overnight." Yoon-ji wasn't satisfied with this answer, but she knew better than to argue with a counselor. Instead, she used her intelligence clearance to access what files she could. Most of the Sol 3 records were classified beyond her level, but she found fragments, small pieces of reports that mentioned adaptive warfare and rapid technological development, and most disturbing of all, they learn faster than we can adapt. Over the next several weeks, more ghost ships appeared at the quarantine border. Sometimes there was one, sometimes a dozen. They watched hegemony patrols from a distance, always staying just outside the Forbidden Zone. Every attempt at communication failed. Every attempt to get closer resulted in the mysterious ships vanishing without a trace. Commander Hyunwoo found himself assigned to permanent patrol duty along the quarantine border. His job was to watch the watchers, but he was beginning to Feel like the hunted rather than the hunter. The ghost ship seemed to know exactly where his patrol would be. They appeared at perfect distances to observe his ship's capabilities without being threatened. "Sir, I think they're studying us," said Lieutenant Tae Young during one encounter. "Studying us how? Watch their movement patterns. Every time we change course, they adjust to keep the same distance. Every time we power up weapons, they move just far enough away to stay safe. It's like they're learning our capabilities." Yunwoo realized his lieutenant was right. The ghost ships weren't just watching, they were conducting experiments. They would appear at different distances and angles, observing how quickly the hegemony ships could detect them, how fast they could turn, how powerful their sensors were. It was systematic and methodical. The most disturbing incident happened 3 months after the first sighting. Hyunwoo's patrol encountered a single ghost ship that didn't run away. Instead, it performed what could only be described as a detailed scan of his vessel. Energy beams swept over the hegemony ship from bow to stern, analyzing every system. "Sir, they're scanning our weapons, our engines, our computer systems. Everything," reported Tae Young with obvious worry. "Power weapons and prepare to fire. Weapons powered, sir." The moment the weapons came online, the ghost ship accelerated away at a speed that should have torn it apart from gravitational stress. But it survived, disappearing into the distance, while Hyunwoo's crew watched in stunned silence. That night, Yoonji sat in her small office reviewing the day's reports. The pattern was becoming clear, and it frightened her. The ghost ships weren't random encounters, they were deliberate intelligence-gathering missions. Someone inside the Forbidden Zone was learning everything they could about hegemony technology and capabilities. She thought about the ancient files she had managed to access. The fragments spoke of a species that adapted quickly, that learned from every encounter. 200 years was a long time for any species to develop. What if the primitive hostiles had used that time to become something else entirely? The hegemony had always believed that their technology made them invincible. They had conquered the galaxy because they were stronger and smarter than everyone else. But what if they had left something alone long enough for it to become stronger and smarter than them? As Yoonji stared at the reports scattered across her desk, she realized that the hegemony might have made the biggest mistake in their 3,000-year history. They had assumed that power meant control, but they had forgotten that isolation could mean evolution. The Watchers at the Forbidden Zone were no longer the primitives of 2 centuries past. They had become something new, something that the hegemony was not prepared to face. And they were learning everything they needed to know about their former captors. The Empire's greatest strength, their absolute confidence in their superiority, was about to become their greatest weakness. Admiral Taeho commanded the largest fleet in hegemony space. His ships patrolled the outer rim territories, keeping order among the conquered worlds. He had fought in dozens of battles and never felt fear. But lately, something was making him very uncomfortable. The ghost ships were everywhere now. Not just at the Sol 3 border, but throughout the outer territories. They appeared during military exercises, watching from safe distances as hegemony forces practiced their maneuvers. They studied trade routes, mapping the flow of goods and ships between worlds. Every time his forces tried to intercept them, the mysterious vessels simply vanished. "Sir, we have another sighting," reported Captain Bowman from the communications station. "3 unknowns observing our war games in the Vega sector." Taeho looked at the tactical display. His fleet of 60 ships was practicing attack formations against simulated enemies. The 3 ghost ships hung at the edge of sensor range, perfectly positioned to observe everything without being threatened. "Send the fast attack squadron. Try to get close enough for visual identification." "Yes, sir." 6 of his fastest ships broke formation and accelerated toward the observers. As always, the ghost ships waited until the last possible moment before disappearing. But this time, something was different. The unknowns had stayed longer than usual, getting a complete view of the hegemony's latest tactical doctrine. "Admiral, they're not just watching anymore," said his tactical officer, Lieutenant Colonel Min-A. "They're learning our battle strategies." On the research station Kepler 442, Dr. Bora was making discoveries that worried the entire scientific community. She had been studying the energy signatures left behind by the ghost ships, trying to understand their technology. What she found shouldn't have been possible. They're using controlled exotic matter, she explained to her research team. The energy patterns show manipulation of space-time itself. This is theoretical technology that we thought was impossible for at least another 1,000 years. Her assistant, Dr. Junho, looked at the data in disbelief. But if they can control exotic matter, that means they can manipulate gravity, create pocket dimensions, maybe even affect time flow. Exactly. And here's the really frightening part. Every encounter shows improvements. The first ghost ships we detected 6 months ago were impressive. The ones we're seeing now are showing capabilities that our best theorists can't explain. Bora pulled up a comparison chart showing energy signatures from different encounters. The progression was clear and terrifying. The ghost ships were getting better at everything. Stealth, speed, energy manipulation, with each passing week. They're not just using advanced technology, she realized. They're improving it in real time. Every encounter with our forces teaches them something new, and they apply that knowledge immediately. Captain Jamin of the heavy cruiser Dominion's Edge experienced this improvement firsthand during a routine patrol near the quarantine border. His ship was one of the newest in the fleet, equipped with the latest sensors and weapons. He felt confident that nothing could surprise him. He was wrong. 12 ghost ships appeared around his cruiser simultaneously, surrounding him in a perfect sphere formation. They didn't attack or make any threatening moves. Instead, they performed what could only be described as a complete medical examination of his ship. "Sir, they're scanning everything," reported his science officer with obvious panic. "Hull composition, weapon specifications, engine output, computer systems, even the crew quarters. They're mapping our entire ship down to the molecular level." Jamin had faced enemy fleets before, but this felt different, more intimate, more violating. The ghost ships moved around his vessel like doctors examining a patient, their scanners probing every detail of hegemony technology. "Power all weapons," he ordered. "Prepare to fire on my command." The moment his weapons came online, all 12 ghost ships accelerated away at impossible speeds. Not impossible because they were fast. Impossible because they should have been torn apart by the gravitational forces involved. No known material could survive that kind of acceleration. But they did survive, disappearing into the void while Jamin's crew watched helplessly. Worse, the scanners showed that the ghost ships had recorded everything about the weapons powering up. They now knew exactly how hegemony weapons worked. The reports from across the Empire painted a disturbing picture. Intelligence Director Su Jin compiled hundreds of encounters into a single briefing for the Hegemony Council. The pattern was undeniable and frightening. "The ghost ships are conducting systematic intelligence gathering," she reported to the assembled counselors. "They observe our military exercises, study our trade routes, scan our technology, and analyze our tactical responses. Every piece of information they gather is being used to improve their own capabilities." Supreme Counselor Youngsu, leader of the Empire, listened with growing concern. He was an old man who had ruled for 40 years through strength and intimidation. Thursan, idea that something unknown was studying his empire made him very uncomfortable. "What do we know about their origins?" he asked. "All evidence points to the Sol 3 quarantine zone," replied Sujin. "Every ghost ship appears to originate from that direction, and they never venture more than 100 light years from the forbidden system." Counselor Daejin slammed his fist on the table. "This is exactly what I warned about. We should have destroyed that system 200 years ago instead of just containing it. Now these primitives think they can challenge the hegemony." "Sir, with respect, they may no longer be primitives," said Sujin carefully. "Impossible. A species doesn't advance from stone tools to starships in 2 centuries. Intelligence analyst Yunji had finally gained access to more classified files, and what she found made her blood run cold. The original contact reports spoke of humans who showed unprecedented adaptive capabilities and rapid technological integration. Even 200 years ago, they had been learning from captured hegemony equipment and improving upon it. "Sir, The original reports describe a species with an unusual ability to reverse engineer technology and improve it quickly, she reported. They weren't just primitive, they were primitive but incredibly smart. Smart doesn't matter against superior firepower, declared Dae-jin. But Yoon-ji had found more disturbing information. The humans had managed to capture several hegemony ships during the original conflict. They had studied the technology, learned from it, and used that knowledge to fight more effectively. The quarantine hadn't been imposed because the humans were defeated. It had been imposed because they were becoming too dangerous to fight. The current ghost ship encounters showed the same pattern, but on a massive scale. Every observation run, every scan, every tactical study was giving the humans more information about current hegemony capabilities. 200 years of isolation had given them time to develop, and now they were using the hegemony's own arrogance to learn everything they needed to know. Dr. Bora's latest analysis confirmed the worst fears. The exotic matter manipulation showed signs of technology that could only come from centuries of focused development. The humans hadn't been sitting idle during their quarantine. They had been working, learning, and growing. They've turned isolation into advantage, she reported. While we assumed they were contained and harmless, they were studying every scrap of information they could gather about us. Every patrol ship, every communication signal, every piece of debris that drifted into their space. They learned from all of it. Admiral Tejo finally understood what was happening. The ghost ships weren't just conducting intelligence gathering. They were preparing for something. Every scan, every observation, every tactical study was building toward some greater purpose. They're planning something, he told his staff officers. All this information gathering has a goal. They're preparing for a confrontation. The question was, what could they do about it? The hegemony had the largest military force in the galaxy, but the humans seemed to understand it better than the hegemony understood theirs. Every advantage the Empire thought it had was being systematically analyzed and countered. As reports continued to pour in from across the outer territories, one thing became clear. The Watchers were no longer content to simply observe. They were studying their former captors with the methodical patience of a species that had learned to think in centuries rather than years, and when they were ready, they would act. The Empire that had ruled the galaxy for 3 millennia was about to face something it had never encountered before, an enemy that knew them better than they knew themselves. Governor Wu Jin of the Proxima sector was tired of being watched. For months, the ghost ships had been observing his territory, studying his defenses and making his people nervous. He was a military man who believed in action, not patience. When 3 mysterious vessels appeared near his sector's border with the quarantine zone, he decided enough was enough. "Sir, the unknowns are maintaining position at the usual distance," reported his tactical officer. "Not today," said Wu Jin firmly. "Today we send them a message. All ships, prepare for coordinated attack." His defense fleet consisted of 12 heavy cruisers and 30 smaller attack ships. Against 3 ghost ships, it should have been overwhelming force. Counselor Dae-jin had been pushing for aggressive action, and Wu Jin decided to be the one to take it. "Sir, are you sure about this?" asked Captain Min-soo, his fleet commander. "We don't know what their capabilities are. I know they've been spying on us for months. I know they're trespassing in hegemony space. That's enough." Wu Jin opened a communication channel to the ghost ships. "Unknown vessels, you have 10 seconds to leave hegemony territory or we will fire." The 3 ships continued their steady flight pattern, showing no sign they had received the message. "Time's up. All ships open fire. 42 hegemony warships. Unleash their weapons simultaneously." Plasma beams, quantum torpedoes, and particle cannons filled space with deadly energy. The ghost ships' shields flared as they absorbed the massive attack, but they held. For a moment it looked like the mysterious vessels might survive. Then their shields failed. All 3 ghost ships were destroyed in brilliant explosions that lit up the sector. Wu Jin felt satisfied. Finally, someone had shown these mysterious Watchers that the hegemony was not to be trifled with. He prepared a victory report for Central Command, expecting praise for his decisive action. The response came 18 hours later. Every hegemony military installation within 20 light years of Sol 3 went silent at exactly the same time. No warning, no distress calls, no battle communications. They simply stopped transmitting. Communication attempts received only empty static. Captain Yun Su led the first investigation fleet to the affected systems. What she found defied all understanding of warfare. The massive orbital defense platforms around Kepler 186 were gone, not destroyed but completely absent. Where multi-kilometer defense stations had floated in space, there were now perfectly spherical voids of absolute emptiness. "Sir, there's no debris," reported her science officer with confusion. "No wreckage, no energy residue, nothing. It's like the stations were just removed." The same pattern repeated at every military installation. Defense fleets that had consisted of hundreds of ships were simply gone. Ground-based military facilities had vanished, leaving behind smooth craters that looked like they had been carved out with surgical precision, but civilian populations and infrastructure remained completely untouched. Whatever did this had incredible precision, Yun Su reported back to Central Command. They targeted only military assets, civilian cities, trade stations, mining operations, all untouched. This wasn't random destruction. This was surgical removal of specific targets. The weapons used left no signatures that hegemony science could understand. No radiation, no energy patterns, no residual effects. Objects simply ceased to exist, leaving behind perfect voids in space. It was technology beyond anything in hegemony databases. Admiral Kyung-ho was placed in command of the emergency response. He was the hegemony's most experienced military leader, a man who had conquered 6-star systems and never lost a battle. If anyone could handle this crisis, it was him. "Mobilize the 3rd and 7th battle groups," he ordered. "I want 300 ships ready for immediate deployment." His chief engineer, Min Ho, equipped the fleet with the latest adaptive shielding and quantum torpedo systems. These were the most advanced weapons the hegemony had ever produced, capable of destroying entire planets if necessary. "Sir, are we really going to attack the Sol 3 system directly?" asked his tactical coordinator. "We're going to end this threat once and for all," replied Kyung-ho. "These ghost ships have shown they can be destroyed. We just need enough firepower to overwhelm whatever defenses they have." The massive fleet assembled at the quarantine border, 300 of the finest warships in hegemony space, carrying enough firepower to sterilize entire worlds. Kyung-ho felt confident that no force in the galaxy could stand against such overwhelming military might. They never reached the Sol 3 system. At the exact boundary of the quarantine zone, a single vessel appeared to meet them. It was sleek and elegant, barely a kilometer long compared to the massive hegemony dreadnoughts. Against 300 warships, it looked impossibly small and vulnerable. "Unknown vessel, this is Admiral Kyung-ho of the Hegemony Defense Force," he broadcast. "You are ordered to stand down and allow passage to the Sol 3 system." The response came in perfect hegemonic language, spoken with calm authority. "You may not pass. Return to your territories or be removed." Kyung-ho laughed. A single small ship was threatening 300 of the most powerful warships ever built. The arrogance was almost amusing. "Unknown vessel, you are outnumbered 300 to 1. Surrender immediately, or be destroyed." "You may not pass," the voice repeated. "This is your final warning. All ships, target the unknown vessel, and prepare to fire. On my mark." Kyung-ho paused for dramatic effect. "Fire!" 300 warships opened fire simultaneously. Every weapon system in the fleet, plasma cannons, quantum torpedoes, particle beams, fusion missiles, unleashed their fury at the single small ship. The combined firepower was enough to crack a moon. The alien vessel's shields absorbed the attack without visible strain. But that wasn't the impossible part. The impossible part was what happened next. Every shot fired by the hegemony fleet was somehow caught, redirected, and sent back at the attacking ships. Plasma beams that had been fired at the alien vessel curved through space and struck the ships that had fired them. Quantum torpedoes turned around in flight and exploded against their launch platforms. Particle beams reversed direction and sliced through the hulls of their own origin points. In less than 10 minutes, the 3rd and 7th battle groups ceased to exist. 300 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy were destroyed by their own weapons, turned against them with impossible precision. The alien vessel remained completely undamaged, floating peacefully in space, surrounded by the debris of the hegemony fleet. Captain Namjoon of the cruiser Imperial Will survived the battle because his ship's weapons had malfunctioned and failed to fire. He watched in horror as his entire fleet was systematically destroyed by their own weapons, redirected with a precision that spoke of technology beyond hegemony understanding. How? He whispered to his shocked crew. How did they turn our own weapons against us? The alien vessel opened a communication channel. The same calm voice spoke to the few surviving ships. You were warned. Return to your territories. Any further military action against Sol 3 will result in more severe consequences. Namjoon didn't need to be told twice. He ordered his damaged ship to retreat immediately, carrying news of the disaster back to Central Command. The report sent shockwaves through the hegemony government. In a single engagement, they had lost 600 ships and thousands of trained personnel. The enemy hadn't used exotic weapons or overwhelming numbers. They had simply turned the hegemony's own strength against itself. Counselor Dae-jin read the battle report 3 times before he could accept what had happened. They redirected our weapons? All of them? Every single shot, sir, confirmed the intelligence briefing. Somehow they were able to control the trajectory of our weapons, after they were fired, turning them back on the attacking ships. For the first time in his military career, Dae-jin felt genuine fear. An enemy that could turn your own weapons against you was not an enemy that could be defeated through superior firepower. It was an enemy that made your strength into weakness. Supreme, Counselor Young-soo called an emergency session of the full Hegemony Council. The empire that had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years had just suffered its first major military defeat. Worse, they had been defeated by a single ship defending a supposedly primitive system. How many ships do they have? Asked one counselor. We don't know, admitted Intelligence Director Soo-jin. We've never seen more than a dozen at once, but that doesn't mean there aren't more. What's their total military capacity? Unknown. What are their weapons capabilities? Beyond our current understanding. The questions continued, but the answers were all the same. After months of observation and analysis, the hegemony knew almost nothing about their new enemy, except that they were far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. The humans had shown that they could defend themselves. The question now was what they would do next. The hegemony had drawn first blood, and the humans had responded with overwhelming force. The ancient quarantine that had contained them for 2 centuries was clearly no longer relevant. For the first time in 3 millennia, the galactic hegemony faced an enemy they couldn't understand, couldn't predict, and couldn't defeat through conventional means. The empire that had built its power on superior technology and overwhelming force had just encountered something that made their greatest strengths completely useless. The war had begun. The destruction of the 3rd and 7th battle groups sent shockwaves through every corner of hegemony space. News of the disaster spread quickly, despite government attempts to keep it classified. Member worlds that had trusted the empire's protection for centuries began asking uncomfortable questions. Supreme Counselor Young-soo found himself facing the first serious challenge to his authority in 40 years. Governor San-woo of the Centauri colonies openly questioned whether the hegemony could protect its own territories. Trade routes near the outer rim became dangerous as pirates and rebels took advantage of the military uncertainty. We need answers, Young-soo declared at an emergency council meeting. We need to understand what we're facing. Research Director Hye-jin was given unlimited resources and access to solve the mystery. She assembled the best scientific minds in the empire, but they were working with very little information. The enemy's technology seemed to violate several fundamental laws of physics. They redirected energy weapons after they were fired, she explained to her team. That should be impossible. Once a plasma beam leaves the firing chamber, it can't be controlled remotely. Yet somehow they managed to curve our own shots back at us. Dr. Sungmin, a specialist in exotic physics, had a theory. What if they're manipulating space-time itself? If they can create localized gravitational fields, they could bend the path of energy beams. The energy requirements would be enormous, objected Dr. Ji-won. No ship could carry that kind of power source. No ship using our technology, corrected Sungmin. But we're clearly dealing with technology far beyond our understanding. While the scientists struggled with impossible questions, archivist Nam Wu was digging through the deepest historical databases. His job was usually boring, maintaining old records that few people ever accessed. But the current crisis had made ancient history suddenly very important. The files about Sol 3 were heavily classified, but Nam Wu had discovered something interesting. The classification levels had gaps. Certain documents were restricted at levels that no longer existed in the current system. These were files so old and so secret that the security protocols protecting them had been forgotten. Using careful database queries and some creative interpretation of archive access rules, Nam Wu managed to recover partial records from the original Sol 3 contact. What he found changed everything. The complete first contact reports had been classified beyond belief, but fragments remained in backup systems and cross-referenced files. The picture they painted was nothing like the official story of primitive hostiles. 200 years ago, the hegemony had encountered a species called humans, who possessed technology roughly equivalent to early spaceflight. They had simple chemical rockets, basic electronics, and no faster than light travel. By all normal standards, they should have been easily conquered. Instead, the humans had fought back with a ferocity and intelligence that shocked the hegemony forces. They learned from every engagement, adapted to new situations faster than tactical computers could calculate, and showed a terrifying willingness to sacrifice everything for their freedom. They reverse-engineered captured hegemony equipment. In weeks, read one report fragment. Technologies that took us centuries to develop, they understood and improved upon in months. Their learning curve is unlike anything we've encountered. Nam Wu found records of several hegemony ships that had been captured by the humans. Within days, the humans were using modified versions of hegemony weapons against their former owners. They didn't just copy the technology, they made it better. The most disturbing report came from Admiral Ji Hoon, who had led the original contact mission. His personal log, thought lost for 2 centuries, contained a final entry that made Nam Wu's blood run cold. The humans are learning faster than we can adapt our tactics. Every engagement teaches them something new about our capabilities while we learn nothing about theirs. They fight like no species we've ever encountered, not just to win, but to understand. If we cannot contain them quickly, they will become unstoppable. The quarantine hadn't been imposed because the humans were defeated. It had been imposed because they were becoming too dangerous to fight. The hegemony had surrounded their system and declared it off limits, hoping that isolation would prevent the humans from spreading their dangerous adaptability to other species. Nam Wu brought his findings to research director Hye Jin, who immediately understood the implications. The humans hadn't been sitting idle during 2 centuries of quarantine. They had been learning. Every patrol ship, every communication signal, every piece of space debris that drifted into their system, she realized. They studied it all. 200 years of constant intelligence gathering. Dr. Seo Jun, a specialist in technological development, ran calculations based on the historical data. If the humans' learning rate had remained constant, they should have achieved technological parity with the hegemony within 50 years. If their rate had accelerated, which seemed likely given their demonstrated adaptability, they could have surpassed hegemony technology decades ago. The ghost ships weren't just observing us, Seojun reported. They were teaching themselves. Every encounter was a carefully planned learning experience. They showed us just enough of their capabilities to see how we would respond, then adapted their tactics based on our reactions. The revelation was staggering. For months, the hegemony had thought they were dealing with mysterious observers who might pose a future threat. In reality, they had been facing teachers who were using the Empire's own arrogance as a curriculum. Intelligence analyst Yoonji finally gained access to the complete original contact files and found the most frightening detail of all. The humans hadn't just learned from captured technology, they had learned from captured personnel. Several hegemony officers had been taken prisoner during the original conflict. When they were eventually returned as part of the quarantine agreement, they reported that the humans had questioned them extensively about Empire structure, military doctrine, and technological capabilities. They didn't torture our people for information, she reported. They educated themselves. They asked questions about physics, engineering, tactics, and politics. They treated our captured officers like teachers in a classroom. The humans had spent 2 centuries not just developing technology, but understanding their enemy. They knew how the hegemony thought, how it operated, and, most importantly, how it would react to different situations. Every ghost ship encounter had been carefully planned to gather specific information while revealing minimal details about human capabilities. The recent military defeat hadn't been a desperate defensive action. It had been a demonstration. The humans had shown exactly enough strength to neutralize the threat while making it clear that they had been holding back significantly. They could have destroyed our entire fleet, realized Admiral Tejo when he reviewed the battle analysis. Instead, they used our own weapons against us. It was a lesson, not a massacre. The message was clear. The humans wanted the hegemony to understand that continued aggression would be futile. They had demonstrated technological superiority so complete that resistance was meaningless, but they had done it in a way that minimized casualties. Counselor Dejin refused to accept the implications. Technology doesn't make them invincible. We have more ships, more resources, more territory. Numbers still matter. But Dr. Hejin's analysis suggested otherwise. Sir, if they can redirect our weapons, our numerical advantage becomes a liability. The more ships we send, the more firepower they can turn against us. The humans had achieved something that no military strategist had thought possible. They had made the enemy's strength into weakness. Superior numbers meant more weapons to be redirected. Advanced technology meant more complex systems to be turned against their creators. Supreme Counselor Young-Soo finally understood the true scope of the crisis. The hegemony faced an enemy that knew them better than they knew themselves, had technology that made their weapons useless, and possessed an adaptability that made conventional warfare impossible. What do they want? He asked the assembled experts. The answer came from an unexpected source. The humans themselves sent a message to every major hegemony installation simultaneously, bypassing all communication security protocols with casual ease. People of the galactic hegemony, the message began in perfect hegemonic. We are the humans of Sol 3. For 2 centuries you have kept us isolated while you ruled the galaxy through fear and force. That time is ending. The message continued, with calm authority. We do not seek conquest or revenge. We seek freedom, for ourselves and for all species living under your empire. The galaxy is large enough for many different peoples to thrive, but only if no single power claims dominion over all others. Young-Soo realized with growing horror that the humans weren't just technologically superior, they were politically sophisticated. The message had been broadcast to every world in hegemony space, including the conquered species who might be sympathetic to talk of freedom. The humans had spent 2 centuries studying more than just technology. They had learned about politics, economics, and social structures. Admiral Inho stood on the bridge of his flagship, surrounded by the largest military force ever assembled in hegemony history. Nearly 1,000 ships filled the space around him, every available warship pulled from every corner of the empire for one final assault on Sol 3. If sheer numbers couldn't overwhelm the humans, nothing could. Sir, all fleet groups report. Ready? Announced Captain Dongwu from the communications station. Strategic Coordinator Mi Young had spent weeks developing what she believed was an unbeatable plan. Instead of a single massive attack that could be redirected, the fleet would strike from multiple vectors simultaneously using weapons that couldn't be turned back on the attackers. Phase 1 uses kinetic projectiles, she explained to the Admiral. Solid metal slugs fired at high velocity. No energy signature to redirect, just pure physics. Phase 2 deploys gravity mines that create localized space distortions. Phase 3 releases swarm missiles that separate into thousands of individual warheads. It was brilliant in its simplicity. Even if the humans could redirect energy weapons, they couldn't possibly handle thousands of separate physical projectiles attacking from dozens of different directions at once. Begin final approach to the Sol system, ordered Inho. The massive fleet moved forward like an unstoppable tide, 1,000 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy, carrying enough firepower to sterilize entire worlds. Admiral Inho felt confident that no force in the universe could stand against such overwhelming military might. As they approached the quarantine boundary, Captain Dongwu received an incoming transmission on all frequencies simultaneously. "Sir, we're getting a message. It's broadcasting to the entire fleet at once." On screen, the display showed a human face, the first time anyone in the hegemony had actually seen one of their mysterious enemies. She appeared to be middle-aged, with dark hair and calm eyes that seemed to look directly at each viewer. When she spoke, it was in perfect hegemonic. "I am Ambassador Terra Human Collective," she said with quiet authority. "I speak for all human worlds and settlements. Admiral Inho, I offer you terms for peaceful coexistence." Inho was startled to hear his name. How did they know who he was? How were they broadcasting to his entire fleet without him authorizing the channel? The ambassador continued. "We propose the following agreement. The hegemony will withdraw all military forces to a distance of 100 light-years from Sol. All aggressive actions against human interests will cease immediately. In exchange, we will share certain technological advances that will benefit all species, and we will respect current territorial boundaries." The message wasn't just being broadcast to the fleet. Intelligence reports confirmed that it was being transmitted simultaneously to every world in hegemony space, somehow bypassing all communication security protocols in existence. Furthermore, the ambassador added, "We propose gradual power transfer to member worlds seeking independence from imperial rule. The galaxy is large enough for many different civilizations to thrive without any single power, claiming dominion over all others." Supreme Counselor Young Su, watching from Central Command, felt his authority cracking. The humans were speaking directly to the conquered peoples, offering them exactly what many had wanted for centuries: freedom from hegemony rule. Admiral Inho rejected the terms with predictable arrogance. "Unknown vessel, this is Admiral Inho of the Hegemony Defense Force. You are outnumbered 1,000 to 1. Surrender immediately or face complete destruction." The ambassador's expression didn't change. "Admiral, you have been warned. Any attack on Sol 3 will result in severe consequences for your empire. This is not a threat. It is a statement of fact." "All ships begin the attack," ordered Inho. The result was swift and comprehensive. Every hegemony ship in the Sol system was disabled within minutes, not destroyed, but rendered completely powerless. Weapon systems shut down, engines went dead, shields collapsed. Life support remained functional, but everything else simply stopped working. Captain Dongwu stared at his control panels in disbelief. "Sir, all systems are offline. Everything just stopped." The same thing was happening throughout the fleet. 1,000 warships sat helpless in space, their crews trapped aboard vessels that had become floating prisons. The humans hadn't used overwhelming firepower or exotic weapons. They had simply reached out and turned off the hegemony's technology as the crew sat in their darkened ships. More human vessels began appearing throughout the system, not dozens or hundreds, thousands. Sleek ships that seemed to materialize from empty space, revealing that humanity had perfected technology that made them effectively invisible until they chose to be seen. Admiral Inho realized with growing horror that the humans could have destroyed the hegemony fleet at any time. They had simply chosen not to. The few ghost ships that had been observed over the past months represented a tiny fraction of their actual military capability. "How many ships do they have?" whispered Captain Dongwu. The answer came from the ambassador, who had somehow accessed their communication system. "Enough, Admiral. We have learned much about military strategy during our isolation. The best victory is one that doesn't require a battle." The human fleet didn't attack the disabled hegemony ships. Instead, they began demonstrating their true capabilities. With casual ease, they started dismantling the hegemony's communication networks, transportation infrastructure, and military installations across dozens of star systems simultaneously. The attacks weren't destructive, they were surgical. Human ships appeared at strategic locations throughout hegemony space, using technology that the Empire couldn't understand or counter. Communication relays simply vanished. Military bases were disassembled at the molecular level. Space stations were relocated to uninhabited systems where they could be studied without endangering their crews. It wasn't conquest through force. It was conquest through technological superiority so complete that resistance was meaningless. Governor Sang-Woo of the Core Worlds was among the first to understand what was happening. The humans weren't trying to destroy the hegemony. They were demonstrating that they could destroy it whenever they chose. The message was clear. Continued resistance would be futile. Open a channel to the human ambassador. He ordered his communications. Officer, sir, we're not authorized to. I'm authorizing it. The council's authority is finished. Within hours, Sang-Woo had negotiated the surrender of his entire sector and declared independence from the failing empire. The human terms were generous: complete autonomy for member worlds, technological assistance for peaceful development, and protection from any remaining hegemony forces. The pattern repeated across the empire. Governor after governor, admiral after admiral, realized that the humans offered partnership where the hegemony had demanded submission. The 1,000-year empire began collapsing as member worlds chose freedom over fear. Counselor Dae-jin, architect of the aggressive policies that had triggered the conflict, found himself standing trial not before human judges, but before representatives. Of the species the hegemony had oppressed for millennia, the humans had kept meticulous records of every atrocity, every act of suppression, every life lost to imperial arrogance. The defendant is charged with crimes against sapient species, announced the tribunal president. How do you answer these charges? Dae-jin looked around the courtroom filled with beings from dozens of worlds, species he had helped conquer, peoples he had dismissed as inferior. Now they were his judges, and the evidence against him was overwhelming. The humans had given the conquered peoples something the hegemony never could: justice. Supreme Counselor Young-soo spent his final days in power trying to understand how everything had gone so wrong. The humans had achieved something impossible. They had defeated the galaxy's greatest military power without firing a shot in anger. How? He asked Ambassador Terra Human Collective during their final negotiation. You taught us, she replied, simply. Every patrol ship, every communication signal, every act of aggression. You showed us exactly how your empire worked and how to defeat it. We learned that your greatest weakness was also your greatest strength. What do you mean? Your absolute confidence in your superiority. You were so certain that nothing could challenge you that you never considered the possibility that something might grow beyond your ability to control it. The final irony was that the humans had used the hegemony's own arrogance as their primary weapon. The Empire's certainty that they were invincible had blinded them to the threat growing in their midst. Their refusal to consider that primitives might evolve had given humanity exactly the time and motivation they needed to transcend their limitations. In the end, Terran space remained prohibited, not by force, but by choice. The humans had transcended the need for conquest, having achieved something far more powerful than military dominance. They had proven that the greatest strength lay not in controlling others, but in growing beyond the need for control at all. The galactic hegemony collapsed not because it was destroyed, but because its own people chose something better. The humans had shown the galaxy that cooperation was stronger than domination, that growth was more powerful than stagnation, and that the future belonged to those who could adapt rather than those who tried to control. The Empire had lost everything to their own arrogance while